You often assume that presence must be explained. You ask where it comes from. You ask what caused it. You ask what stands behind it. This questioning feels intelligent. It feels responsible. It feels necessary. Yet a quiet paradox appears. Before any explanation can be formed, presence is already here. Before any cause can be proposed, existence is already undeniable. Ibn Arabi challenged this unnoticed assumption. He did not begin by asking what caused existence. He asked whether existence itself could ever be the kind of thing that requires a cause. You tend to treat presence as if it were a problem to be solved. But what if presence is not a problem at all? What if explanation is needed only for secondary things, not for what is fundamental? Ibn Arabi developed his thought within the tradition of Islamic metaphysics, where scholars examined existence, causality, and divine reality with careful precision. Many thinkers in this tradition sought to explain how the world came into being and how humans could relate to a transcendent creator. Existence was often treated as an effect, and God is the ultimate cause. Ibn Arabi did not reject this language, but he approached it from a deeper level. His primary concern was not ritual, law, or devotional symbolism. It was ontology. What does it mean to exist? And what does it mean for existence to be known? He noticed that much theological thinking assumed a gap between human awareness and ultimate reality. Humans were seen as distant. God was seen as separate. Ibn Arabi questioned whether this distance was real or conceptual. His writings repeatedly point toward a radical claim. Being itself is self-disclosing. Existence does not hide behind something else. It is immediately present. Why would calling presence self-sufficient challenge established systems of thought? You are trained to ask why. Why did this happen? Why does this exist? Why does anything exist at all? This habit is useful. It allows science, planning, and learning to function. But notice how easily the habit becomes total. You begin to assume that everything must have a reason. A thought arises. You ask why. An emotion appears. You ask why. A situation unfolds. You ask why. Eventually, you apply the same demand to existence itself. Why is there something rather than nothing? The question feels profound. It feels unavoidable. But look carefully. The demand for explanation arises within existence. The question appears within presence. The one asking the question already exists. So the demand assumes what it tries to explain. Is explanation always appropriate? Or is the explanation sometimes misplaced? Every explanation appears as a thought. That thought is present. It is noticed. It is understood. None of this happens outside presence. Explanation does not stand on its own. It requires awareness. It requires recognition. It requires existence. Please do not modify the inside explanation. Explanation appears inside presence. This is subtle but important. You tend to imagine explanation as more fundamental than presence. You imagine that if you could just find the right explanation, presence would make sense. But the explanation itself already relies on presence. This means presence is not waiting to be justified by explanation. Presence is the condition that allows explanation to exist at all. So, asking for an explanation of presence reverses the actual order. It treats the foundation as if it were a dependent product. Can the ground of explanation itself require explanation? Ibn Arabi argued that being does not need external justification. Objects within the world have causes. Events within the world have conditions. Processes within the world depend on other processes, but being itself is not an object. Within the world, being is not one item among many. It is what allows there to be items at all. If you treat being as a thing, you immediately distort it. You place it inside the category of things that appear. Ibn Arabi suggested that being simply is, not because it decided to be, not because something forced it to be, not because it emerged from something else. It is not caused in the way objects are caused. It is self-validating. To ask why being exists is to assume that being belongs to a class of things that require reasons. The being is not a member of a class. Is asking why being exists mistaking being for a thing within being? You often assume that if something exists, it must have a cause. This assumption works well inside the world. Fire requires fuel. Plants require soil. Thoughts require brains. These are causal relationships, but causality itself operates within existence. Cause and effect appear within presence. So presence cannot be one more link in a causal chain. Presence is not caused by something earlier, because earlier only has meaning inside. Presence. This is the confusion. You treat existence as if it were another event in time, but time itself appears within existence. So existence cannot belong to its own causal chain. Can existence itself be caused in the same way objects are caused? You have thoughts about existence. You think I exist. You think the world exists. You think reality exists. But notice something simple. Before any of these thoughts appear, presence is already here. Thoughts come and go. Presence does not come and go. You do not conclude presence. You assume it. Even doubt assumes presence. If you doubt your existence, the doubt is present. If you deny existence, the denial is present. Presence is not reached by reasoning. Presence is what makes reasoning possible. This means presence is not a conclusion. It is the starting point that is never announced as a starting point. Does what is always assumed need proof? Ibn Arabi referred to this understanding as ancient. Not ancient in the sense of old. Not ancient as belonging to a historical era. Ancient in the sense of not produced. Presence is not born. Presence does not begin. Presence does not start. All beginnings appear within presence. Time unfolds within presence. So presence cannot be a product of time. Calling presence ancient points to this structural priority. It means presence is not dependent on conditions. It does not age. It does not develop. It does not decay. Not because it lasts forever as a thing, but because it is not a thing at all. Does timeless mean outside time? Or does it mean never depending on time? You may notice resistance to the idea that presence needs no explanation, not dramatic resistance, not an emotional reaction, a quieter discomfort. The mind equates understanding with explanation. To understand something usually means to know its cause, its function, or its origin. When explanation stops, the mind feels suspended. It feels as if something essential is missing. But notice what is actually missing. Not presence, only a narrative. About presence. The discomfort is not about existence. It is about losing a story that explains existence. The mind prefers models. The mind prefers frameworks. The mind prefers answers. Presence does not fit into these preferences. Does certainty actually require reasons? Recognizing that presence needs no explanation does not make life meaningless. You still wake up. You still work. You still relate. You still choose. But life is no longer framed as a puzzle that must be solved at the deepest level. You do not need to justify existence in order to participate in it. You do not need to know why reality exists in order to respond intelligently to circumstances. Actions still have consequences. Ethics still matter. Learning still matters. But none of this is anchored in a cosmic story about why everything exists. It is anchored in responsiveness. This produces simplicity, not simplistic thinking. But lack of metaphysical burden. Does simplicity reduce depth? Or does it reveal depth that was previously covered by explanation? You began with the assumption that presence must be explained. You end with a question about whether presence ever required explanation. Presence has never waited for justification. Presence has never depended on a reason. The search for a final explanation was a misunderstanding about what kind of thing presence is. Nothing essential has been resolved. Nothing essential has been solved, because nothing essential was ever a problem. If presence needs no explanation, what was ever meant by seeking one?